very excited to be part of this very artist-centric panel, and I think it's worth noting that, so this is the third FastForward conference, and I think this is the most artists we've ever had on stage for a panel before, so I'm very excited, to have a very dynamic conversation about the state of songwriting. I'll skip like the basic intros, as there's a lot of detail in the conference guide about like songwriting credits, etc. I actually want to start off with two pieces of data, since today has been, the big theme has been data around that I think embody the state of songwriting and can start off a conversation. So one, Music Reports did some research this summer and found that now on average, the mainstream songs, which they define as in the Billboard top 10 or 20, they have an average of 4 writers and 6 publishers around them per song. And that number's increased a lot over the past few decades. And the second piece of data is the publication Polygraph, which is a data journalism publication, found that songs have become also 30 to 40% more repetitive, charting in the Billboard top 10 or 20 over time, compared to like around the 60s and the 70s. And so that raises the question of like the influence of mass market trends on your craft, which I'd love to dive into later. But first, so the first point, the nature of collaboration today. So this is a question for the panel, and you guys can jump in whenever. What do you think makes for a successful collaboration in your career, and how has that changed as it has become, just by the numbers, a lot more collaborative, involving a lot more people? Anyone?
I mean, I was thinking about this on the way in. Certainly, a good connection on a personal level with someone is the best starting ground, I would say, for a collaboration. If you're going to spend time with them, you need to make sure that you can communicate with them properly. So I before I go into the studio with someone, I quite like to just go down the pub with them, or go and have a coffee or something, get to know them, get to know what where their mind is at, you know. That's a very good starting ground, I'd find, for that sort of thing.
I also think maybe covering a few different bases, like in a session. So like there's a producer who's really, you know, an expert producer, and you've got someone who's a bit more lyric based, or someone who's a bit more, you know, so you've got to cover like all the different aspects. And that usually makes for a good collaboration, because everyone's got their kind of defined role, although it's never that simple, but like, that definitely helps. Mm-hmm.
I think like any social anxiety I had pretty much disappeared like as soon as I started doing writing sessions, because it requires a certain level of, especially if you're a songwriter with an artist, like it requires a certain level of just being open yourself and also encouraging someone to be open with you. So it's like really cliche, but it is kind of like a therapy thing as well. Like, because if you want to write something meaningful, you have to kind of break down those barriers pretty quickly, and it's hard, like, because, you know, like I have a definitely like an introverted side to my personality that I have to kind of draw out and open myself up. So being open and listening to people, I think, is like trying to establish that connection as quickly as possible. Yeah.
I think also keeping things as natural as possible and knowing where the boundaries are as to when a situation needs a bit of extra motivation and when you're just kind of forcing something that doesn't need to happen and making things way more awkward and make people feel more uncomfortable. Yeah. I've had some sessions that have ended up, I've got, you know, lifelong friends from the session, but learnt that we don't write together very well. But we spent 2 days listening to all of our favourite records and sharing, you know, editorial pieces and just doing life, you know. And from that, they may have recommended me onto something else. But we didn't write a song from that day, but it's definitely been nutritional in my development. Yeah. So.
Building off of, do you guys have anything to add, or no? Okay, so building off of Charlie's point about building a personal relationship with the songwriter, I've noticed there are a couple of companies popping up that are making the case that like now songwriting can be remote, so you don't actually have to meet the person. There are companies that like Tract and Splice are two that come to mind, where a lot of their big selling point is enabling people in different countries across the ocean to collaborate without ever meeting. I'm wondering if that has ever like impacted your career, or do you prefer to have that like face-to-face interaction? Yeah.
I haven't done a Skype session. I don't know if you guys have. No. That freaks me out so much. I don't know, because like you just rely so much upon the bouncing off of like each other and energy and all that kind of stuff. Like I do know a lot of people that, I mean, I've done track work over a track that's been sent to me, but it hasn't been a collaboration with the producer, like live. It's been a back and forwards email thing, but I've never done a Skype session or anything like that.
I've tried. Yeah, but I think actually it's completely true, because when you're in the room with people and you're writing a song together, it's so chemistry and energy based, because music is chemistry really, and people, isn't it, and energy, and you just can't get that over the sort of slightly delayed internet connection that just completely cuts out every 5 minutes. So it wasn't very successful for me. We ended up like stopping the Skype, just writing things separately, coming back together. So I haven't really done a successful live collab.
I always think about like, what is that thing where like immersive VR? Is that what it's called? Yeah. Like how weird that would be if I like developed a thing where you could like be in the room with someone. That would be wild. Someone told me about that one day, and I was like, maybe I'll try that one day if I can like. Yeah.
I've done edits, like post songwriting session, and you know there being a bit of feedback, change a few notes in Google Docs, so you're both present in the session at the same time, and you're both just writing lists of like possible names or themes or emotion, and you can sort of write the lyric idea and in brackets being like, I know this sucks, but something like this, you're like, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm not saying it sucks, it kind of does suck, but we'll totally get there. And just like, here's my sucky idea, and together you're like, oh, this is great, and you're like, cool, and then you just like erase all of the commentary before you send it to the label.
What about you?
Well, as much like the other guys' experiences, really. I mean, I've not actually done a live sort of writing session, but obviously, yeah, like you said, there's the feedback post. Obviously, when you've had your first writing session on a song or something like that, then yeah, you have to obviously remotely sort of break it down a little bit more, and everyone's got quite a busy schedules, so it's a case of like normally there's just like lists of pointers that we're going to look at and things like that, but nothing live, no.
It has led to a lot more opportunities for me, like working remotely sometimes and bouncing things back and forth. And it's also given me access to certain people who wouldn't, because I've been doing some top line writing. I'm an artist as well, but I'm very new to top line writing. So because of my lack of experience, they probably wouldn't have let me in the room. But remotely, I've managed to get my idea in the room, and that's been accepted and taken on board, whereas we wouldn't have ended up writing all together, but the idea was, thankfully good enough to take forward. So it's kind of opened doors that in person I wouldn't have probably had.
Cool. And so with conversations around songwriting and technology, the focus is very often on the finances and how streaming, this could be a whole separate panel about how the impact that streaming has had on songwriters' like careers financially. I'm wondering like how else, if at all, has technology impacted your careers? And it can be creative or financial. If not doing like as much of this remote collaboration.
Well, I think it's affected every aspect of everything we do every single day. And I don't think we can ever go back. Like you can't really imagine living without your phone. You know, we all, like if you're a songwriter, you're recording ideas on your voice memos and taking down notes on your notes bit, and or being able to use Logic to record ideas and send them to people on the internet, like it's extraordinary. Or GarageBand on your iPad or phone or whatever, which is actually pretty good now. You know, like I just think it's completely in every aspect of what we're doing.
It's unavoidable. It is, because obviously I produce as well as songwrite, and it's an interesting one when it comes to being creative, because obviously, computers can do pretty much everything now, and like Logic has so many, like a vast array of synths and all sorts of things you can play with, which is brilliant, such a creative tool. And the sort of things that, in the 60s or whatever, when people were pioneering new sort of techniques, would be pretty tough to do. It's just things like going, reversing a tape or something like that and bouncing everything down. Obviously, you can do it in your sleep now on a computer. But there's a flip side to it, I find, in that sometimes when you're writing a song or being creative, when you've got minimal things at your disposal, you suddenly have to think outside the box a lot more and actually come up with something really unexpected, and that's quite exciting, I think.
Totally. I think like the flip side of technology is like, for me, it's the access to references and like this whole world of information, which is awesome because it expands your mind and gives you inspiration, but then it also makes it really hard to focus. And like, you're so right, like minimal distraction kind of can be a really good thing sometimes. So like, even if that means just not getting the Wi-Fi password, just like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes I'm like, I'm just not gonna ask for it today. I'm not gonna like flip through and whatever, just try, and just makes it hard to focus sometimes. But it can also be awesome and rad.
Is there, I wonder if there's a correlation between songwriting becoming more collaborative and also the volume of like work that you have? And just one question that came to mind is like, can you just like write a song like that on the spot, on demand, or like do you like need the space to really think and like work on a piece? What is that like? Yeah.
Well, you kind of have to write a song on the spot. If you're a professional songwriter, you have a session booked in and you go to that room with those people that you've never met before and have to write a song. So it doesn't matter if you're not feeling very, very inspired that day or whatever. You have to, because it's your job, which makes it a much less fluffy endeavor than like, oh, I'm going to find some inspiration and write a song. You know, it's like, no, you're just going to write a song. But I suppose you're like, I suppose it means that your whole life is like the preparation for that moment, and you're sort of always collecting ideas and inspiration, so that on your really like worst days when you're like, you can still like be happy and inspired and like have great ideas and go and just do it, no matter who you're with. It's very challenging. But I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys have any?
Well, just to back that up, really, yeah, it can be really tough to just, you know, like your job is to be, you know, almost inspirational, provide sort of the, I don't know, the fuel for the day's session. Also, you'd hope that if you're collaborating with someone that they would also do the same.
Yeah.
But if this is, you know, our job, then that is kind of expected of us. And like you say, you just need to have things that maybe like, I don't know, little triggers. I have little triggers in the studio, little just toys lying around that could just ignite something. If you really don't quite know how it's going to start, you know, and you just have some little fun things that you could, again, and as well, like breaking the ice with someone you've never met before.
Yeah.
So it might just be a silly little synthesizer or something that, you know, you bought at a toy shop or something.
Yeah.
And then, you know, instantly they'll be playing with it, and then it can just lead to, well, you don't know what it's going to lead to, but yeah, it can be tough to get that fire going with someone if you've never met them before.
Yeah, fully.
But some days I do come up empty. I think it's important to say that out loud.
Yeah.
Is that sometimes it's just not there. And even if on paper you're just like, on paper, me and this person should write an amazing song that fits perfectly with the brief and is on trend. And you go in there and you're like, I've written a song I never want to hear again today. And I will write a song, but sometimes it's not a very good one, and I'll know it. And, you know, it's usually those ones that someone ends up wanting. And you're like, what? That one? You don't want this one? I love this one. Yeah. But yeah, there's no magic formula. So, for me, sometimes I run out of my magic dust and I'm just like, this is what I got.
Yeah, I have the same thing, but I stopped beating myself up over it. Like when I first started, I was like, it was kind of like, you know, whipping myself after a session, like shame, because I just would like
Game of Thrones.
So, yeah, literally, like feel so like, oh, because I feel like as a creative person in any field, like what you do is so intertwined with who you are. Different, I think, to some other jobs where you can clock on and off. I don't think we ever really like clock on and off. So if you're not good in a session or you don't write a good song, or you feel like just in general creatively you're a little bit dry, you just feel really like a crap person, which is really exhausting. But I've like learned over time to try and separate myself from the creativity. I think like Elizabeth Gilbert, she wrote that book called Big Magic, which is really good. And she talks about your creativity actually being a separate entity to who you are. And so if it doesn't like show up on a day, it's nothing to do with you. It just didn't show up. So I try and think about that. And now if I have a bad session, I kind of like laugh more than I do cry, because it's just like it happens sometimes, and it's not no one's fault really.
But also, I think once you've done it for a while, you realise, okay, some days everybody just needs to go to the pub.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't happen all the time or anything, but sometimes you're just like, look, this is not happening. It's like what you were saying, you know, sometimes it's just like, you need to be able to gauge what's going on in the room, and we're just banging our heads against a brick wall, and it's like, let's just go and hang out and get to know each other better, and then next time it probably will come.
Or after you get drunk at the pub, you go back and you're like, this is great!
Yeah.
Kim, you brought up a point about like sometimes a song that you think is not that good at all, like it ends up being what like I guess your clients, like what the people you're writing for, like what they want, and so that raised a question in me of like how much creative control like you guys like feel like you have, and whether that has ever been like an issue, I don't know, in your career, or how do you like assert that?
It's funny because I was in a session in LA once and someone referenced the bridge as their bridge. Like said, oh, but you know, remember my bridge or something? And I was like, what? That's so weird. Maybe I don't know, I feel like once you're in a room, it's sort of everyone's thing. And I thought that was a really weird thing to say, like my bridge. Some people are quite protective over their ideas, which is fine, but it can be a roadblock sometimes, I think, to like making the best song possible. Yeah, I forgot what the question was. That relevant? I don't know.
Like right on point.
I forgot what was the question.
Just about like creative control, like.
Fully. Yeah. So I think relinquishing that and just being like for the song is the best possible way. Sometimes it's harder.
It's very weird when you're like trying to write for a brief that's come from a label or a publisher or whatever, and I suppose that means you're definitely relinquishing your creative control because you're trying to tick all the boxes. But you know, I remember because I did a lot of writing for One Direction after I'd already had a song cut with them. I then did loads more writing, and I would be able to spot which, like after I'd seen the brief and tried to write to it and like had no success, when the song would finally come out from someone else, it would be like completely different, like the opposite, And it was like, so actually, you can relinquish all your creative control and follow the brief. But in a way, like if you just write an amazing song, it'll probably make its way through anyway. Maybe not in the way you expect, but so perhaps it's like we should always just ignore the brief and like. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, but it's like it's not a science. It's like well, it is a science, but it's a very dark art. The whole thing, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like no one can really tell you what's going to work and what isn't, and it's very kind of random actually what finds its way through. But perhaps it is all about just like retaining your creative control and following your gut and like making the best thing you can possibly make, regardless of whether it fits what you're supposed to be making.
Most of the time, I don't think it's a coincidence, and most of the time the best songs I've written or the best feedback I've gotten has always been from something very autobiographical or meaningful in some way. The songs that I've like tried to write to a brief, like they're looking for a, you know, like an, I don't know, it just sounds like like a crap version of the reference. Yeah. And you just like, that's the worst feeling where you're just like, oh, it's not honest and it just sounds really contrived. So I've tried definitely like recently to just be just as honest as like possible with what I like as well.
Yeah, my experience has been that as well. Like if someone's like, this is a big radio hit or whatever it is, you know, it's quite often the complete opposite. You know, the one that you never thought would sort of nail it on Radio 1 or whatever is, you know, you're playlisted all of a sudden.
Because all those songs are all the really massive songs. Usually there's something a bit weird about them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like they don't really sound like I always think of like Gautier, like the song that he did, like. That's like, it took like 1:50 to get to the chorus. Like if you sent that to an A&R, they'd just be like, no, that's not going to work. And like someone took a risk on that record, or someone had a vision with that record, and that's usually like the ones that are awesome, right? Are the ones that kind of blow your mind in some way. Not all the time, but most of the ones I like that are massive pop things.
Hopefully bringing something new to the table.
Yeah, that's why people
to
latch onto it. Yeah, I think audiences are pretty like a lot more savvy than we like give them credit for. I feel like they can hear something when it's trying to follow a trend too hard or just be a little too, you know, contrived or whatever. I feel like people can feel it rather than know it, but yeah.
Do you have anything to add? Or?
Well, yeah, I just think, there is a habit in a lot of sessions to sit down and for whoever it is in the room to just whack up a streaming platform and be like, cool, I want to, like, this is really hot or whatever. And you're just like, it depends on what the motive of the session is, but yes, that is an option if you're going for a particular market or whatever. But I think a good example of a song that wasn't really following any trend at the time when it came out is Be The One by Dua Lipa, like with that sort of laid back sort of like drum and bass vibe or whatever. And I haven't heard, I thought I was going to hear a lot of songs like that after it, but thankfully I haven't, because I just think they just did something a little bit left at the time that wasn't, it didn't have the typical like instrumental chorus with like the high pitched vocal or whatever at the moment, and it had a chorus, and it was just like, this is cool. So yeah, I think as it is about sometimes following trends if it suits the artist, I think, but some things slightly left of centre normally stick out a lot more for everyone.
Yeah, and so I was reminded of something from Merck's interview. He said, this is his advice for managers, but I think it does apply for songwriters, as I hear you guys saying. Like, you should not think about what's happening now, think about what's happening next.
Yeah.
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 I'm wondering, like, to what, how much is that a part of your career? Is it, like, a lot of, and you mentioned, like, you're always, like, you have, like, an overload of inspiration, right? Because you're always, looking to different sources now online. Could you maybe, like, elaborate on that more? Like, so how much, I guess.
What's next?
Or, like,
I always think about, I read an article ages ago about John Legend. When he released Ordinary People, I think he'd been trying to make it for a while, and he was doing kind of like conventional sort of R&B, like slick, because at the time I think it was like 2004 or something, I don't know, and like at the time it was like Usher, that whole Confessions period, it's quite slick R&B, and he came out with Ordinary People, which was just a stripped back piano ballad, really beautiful, kind of honest lyric, and it exploded. And the article was just about how a lot of the times when like trends are going this way, and it's like there's a whole saturation of this one sound or whatever. If something comes out and it's like the opposite, it usually does quite well. So I was trying to think about that, like what is, rather than what do people want, like what's missing, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, if it was easy to predict that, then obviously everyone would be doing it.
Yeah.
You can't, but 100%, just if you live by the rules of like, does it excite you?
Yeah.
Is this feeling fresh to my ears? Then you're winning in that sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because I think a lot of songwriters do. Well, I think people at labels think that they want the same thing again. Oh, that thing's just been really massive. We need something that sounds like that. And I think, if as a songwriter, maybe that's why following the brief doesn't work. But like, if you actually give them what they want, like if you're writing something that's already happened, by the time it comes out, it's going to be so old. Yeah. So I think
fully, because the turnover is like a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like a year.
Yeah.
In the whole process. So
the songwriting process.
Yeah, like if you write a song, it can take like
a year
years.
and a half, or 2 years.
And by the time it comes out, it's like, it was cool then, but now, so. Yeah.
Yeah.
What goes on in that year is just like all back and forth, like trying to come to a consensus on like how the song should sound. Yeah. What goes into
Lots of production tweaks.
Okay.
Sometimes lyrical tweaks, or like revocaling things, or like recording it different ways. I don't know, and maybe marketing.
Yeah, like release schedule.
That's the thing.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Finding a rapper.
For the middle eight.
Haven't found the right feature yet. Need a feature. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So the next question is concerning how I think all of you guys juggle being a songwriter and also being a performer and like being I guess an artist in every sense of the word. And I was wondering if you guys could talk about that balance and if there are any challenges in that, because I know you guys have had very different paths in terms of going between being a performer versus a songwriter. Yeah.
I have different phases of writing, so I like different modes. I'm a songwriter for myself and also top line for other people, but sometimes I'm definitely, I sort of call it gears, is how it makes sense in my head, but sometimes I'm definitely in a artist mode for myself, and when I'm in that mode, I don't go to other sessions, because if I go to that session, I'm going to heavily influence. It's going to be something that I would have for a Kimberley project. I would just impose it on the session, and that's it's something completely out of my control. I literally have modes where I'm going to my manager, I'm just like, I'm not going to be any use to anyone at the moment because I need to be in my own space and need to explore my stuff for a while, and that happens. And other times I can totally immerse myself in the fantasy of working on the people stuff, and I don't even want to think about my stuff at all. And that's the exciting thing. You can sort of have little like times and stuff. But I definitely can't compartmentalize and flick back and forth. That's just a part of my mental makeup. But I've totally forgotten the question.
It was about juggling being, performer versus songwriting for yourself versus for other people.
Yeah, I think it's just, if you're doing both, I think it's about trying to be in tune with yourself and also knowing what the best environment is for you to write. So for example, I know that in a top line scenario, I work best with another top liner and a producer. Because if it's just a producer and myself, I struggle to write for a third party because it feels it's too close, if that makes sense. So if someone else is there to bounce off, the ideas are an amalgamation of all of us, and it feels a bit more removed from an artist project that I would work on. So that's how I know my formula works best.
Yeah, well, I can relate to what you said about not being able to kind of switch quickly. Do you know what I mean? Like, you need that headspace for whatever it is you may be doing. If it, like I say, if you're writing for someone else or for your own thing, and it's exactly the same in the production world as well. Like, when you're in the world of that project, it's so consuming. Do you know what I mean? And you can't. You mentioned about switching off, going home, sort of thing. In this line of stuff, you just don't do that. Yeah. Well, I certainly can't. And you sort of take it home with you, and then you'll wake up at 3 a.m. and just something like, do this tomorrow morning. Change that synth line, whatever it is. So to then, if you're in that world, to then suddenly go into a different world the next day, it's sort of impossible, really. Well, I find anyway. I need to kind of have a sort of bit of breathing space, and then get my head set for the next venture.
I think starting out as a songwriter was a blessing and a curse because it taught me so much about the process of making music, and I've met so many incredible people. But in the process of being a writer for other people and with other people, you have to be a lot of different things for other people. Yeah. And I realized down the line, I was like, it's really diluted my own artistry and like my own vision for what I wanted to do. And I was like, that's really bad. And so it's like, in an ideal world, I'd love to take a year off and work with like all the people I wanted to work on my project. But I sort of decided quite quickly, I was like, right, I picked a corner, right?
Yeah.
Like it picked me in a way, because that's, you ride the waves that are kind of, that you're on. And that was my wave. And I was like, I picked a corner. I'm going to try and smash it and do the best job that I can. Because I know if I try and do both at the same time, I'll probably be average at both. And I was like, if I concentrate on this until another wave comes along, then maybe I have a chance at like really making an impact somehow and creating like the best stuff that I can. Because I don't think if I did both at the same time, I tried and it was crap. So I'm on that wave of like writing, and it's joyous. I don't feel the agony that you do sometimes when you're working on your own thing, because it's so self-critical, and where I can actually just show up and it's a joyous experience. Whereas I found making music for myself could be quite the opposite. But it's I don't know. It's not like I'm not complaining, but it's just like it comes in waves, and you just you write it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Similarly, I tried both for a while. Like for like a year and a half, I was touring and doing my stuff and writing, and you can't do so many things really well at the same time. It's just exhausting. And it dilutes. Yeah. So actually, and now I've been like writing for other people for about 2 years because I wanted to be in that corner. And now like some opportunities are coming around for my stuff again, and I'm like, well, I don't really know what it is anymore, and I need, because you don't I haven't put the time back in, so I think it's like a time and energy thing and mental space. So yeah, massively agree with all of you.
I've started collecting songs that I've realized, because a lot of, like I was saying before, a lot of the stuff I've been writing recently is quite autobiographical, and I've noticed I've just made a little collection, like a little folder that I know is mine. And I've thought, okay, if these songs don't get cut, I don't care because they're mine. So that's kind of cool. You're always, you are an artist. It was weird when people ask if you're a writer or an artist. You're like, I don't know, you're both all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Interestingly, I found when I've done top-line writing, now I'm sort of coming back and writing for my own record, it has changed how I've started to write for myself in a really like liberating way. Because before, I used to be very like, cool, I'm an indie pop artist and I wouldn't say that and I can't be too pop and all this stuff. And now I'm just like, oh, can I say that? Damn right I can say that. And I just like, do I want a big, I'm on top of a mountain chorus? Yes, I do. So, yeah, it's made me a better writer. Yeah.
So my next question is about advice for emerging songwriters. So say someone in the audience right now is like, I want to become a songwriter this year and I'm going to start. How do they start? What advice would you have for them? And also what advice would you have for publishers that they're maybe going to sign to in the future, how they can best nurture them?
Do you mean advice to publishers or advice to them about getting publisher?
like how to know.
Both, if possible, would be. It's a lot, but yeah.
I think finding a community is really important somehow. I moved here from Australia 6 years ago, and I knew it would be really hard to be in London in general, but also to make it in music, on off the cuff without knowing anybody or having. So I went to music college, not because I particularly wanted a degree or thought it was that important, but I was like, it'll be a place to go every day where I can be doing music and also hopefully meet people. And then inevitably I had a songwriting tutor who introduced me to my first manager, and then my first manager started putting me in sessions. So I think somehow finding a community, and it sounds really faffy, but I don't know if it's open mics or something like that. I don't know, but for me it was music, it was college, it was a university. Yeah.
I think community is massively important. It doesn't sound cheesy at all because we all feed and thrive off of each other, not only creatively, but also mentally. I think it's really important that, there's an infrastructure, that artists support each other and stick together through writer's block is a real thing. And it totally comes from a mental state and we have to make sure that new writers are supported and established writers are supported. And I think what I sometimes worry about is new writers being encouraged and not manipulated. For example, with technology, you can have a track that 15 people have had a play in and touched or whatever, and everybody knows the person with the least experience is probably going to be happy to accept a smaller cut than they actually deserve because they need that cut really well. And I think it's up to the community, whether it be producers, other songwriters, to make sure things remain there, whether you're starting out or whether you're quite established, making sure that people get what they're entitled to. And I know there's problems with that in lots of creative industries, but I feel really strongly about that because I feel like we're going to lose a lot of amazingly talented writers who get their fingers burnt too many times and feel like there's no point and actually don't write anymore because they lose their creativity because they feel like, the business is way too manipulative or corruptive, like ghostwriters and stuff, and people getting 1% when they've written half the song and all that stuff. So I think we have to kind of stick together and make sure people get what they deserve as well.
Yeah.
I would say also, find your gang similarly, and also do it every day, and also try pushing through the writer's block and working out how on a day when you have no inspiration to find your inspiration, whether it's go for a walk for 10 minutes, watch part of a movie, or look at some weird paintings or something. I don't know, I think you need to find out how your brain works and how your heart works and how to write songs under weirder circumstances than you normally do. Do you know what I mean? Because as a songwriter, everyone starts off just in their bedroom, feeling something that's really real and writing a song about it. And I suppose that is what you're always doing, essentially, forever, hopefully. But it's finding out what are your obstacles and how are you going to get over them and how are you going to keep going through thick and thin. I think that's really important. Just basically do it every day, I'd say, even if it's for 5 minutes. Even when you're knackered.
And then I guess if you're signed to a major publisher and you're getting like these big like briefs, being able to align that with what the like artist wants or what like the company wants in general, like finding that sweet spot.
Yeah. And like online, so I know I sound really old and croaky, but like it's crazy. I just realized the power of like YouTube and like, because I've never been a covers art, I've never done covers or anything like that, but I was like noodling around in my bedroom playing this song by this artist, and I posted like a 30-second clip of me singing the song. This was like a month ago, and within like 30 minutes she had seen it, posted it on her Insta story, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Little did I know that's what people have been doing for years. But like, that's mental. So like, if you're any good and you put it out there in the world, chances are like people will see it and like catch on. Like that's pretty wild. That like the writer of the song, the artist, was reposting it within like 30 minutes saying thank you, and I was like, what the fuck? Yeah. It's cool. So do more of that, I guess. Put yourself out there.
I think that's the bottom line, isn't it? Just making sure you get stuck in with all sorts of. You never know where an opportunity is going to come up to take your career onto this next level. You really don't know. I mean, I owe a lot of my career to queuing up at a bar to get a pint, and got talking with this guy, and it's led to meeting all sorts of people that have taken me on this amazing journey. But I didn't see that coming. Do you know what I mean? But I was playing a gig that night with my band, and you said about open mic nights and things like that. Just get stuck in. Don't be afraid of
chances.
Don't be afraid of just any opportunity to. Certainly in the early stages, just any opportunity like to prove yourself, to show who you are and what you can do, and you never know who you're going to meet that can take you on to the next level.
Totally.
And to like learn things, just learn everything all the time, and push yourself out of your comfort zone, I think, as well. Because everyone's comfort zone is just watching Netflix. So don't do that. Just don't do that.
Chef's Table was the most inspiring thing. Honestly, when I look for inspiration now, I try and do it something like non-music related. I find, and watching Chef's Table, I was more inspired watching that than I was any rock documentary. I don't know what it was about. I think because I was so like, these people were like so skilled and passionate. Really,
They're framed as
don't knock
artists.
Netflix.
How are we doing on time? 10 minutes? Okay. We should probably open it up for audience Q&A now, if anyone has any questions.
No questions.
That's all, friend.
If not, two in the front here. And,
Hi. Have you ever heard about or done yourself this reported getting to the chorus quicker for streaming so that the skip rate's lower on songs that I've heard and read about? Should I explain that a bit better?
I don't know what that
go on.
means.
Okay, so... Sorry, okay. So, obviously, editorial decisions at most streaming services are based on the performance of the track. Often the performance of the track, part of it is down to whether the track skipped and at what point in the track it skipped.
Oh, yeah.
And therefore, I've heard that in some cases, songwriters, artists, whatever, have been creating music that deliberately reduces the chance of a skip early on. What do you think about this? Have you done it? Have you heard about anyone else doing it?
Yeah, I do that every day. Because, I mean, I think if you spend 10 minutes listening to random stuff on Spotify, you soon realise yourself that you're like, oh no, next. You know what I mean? Like, and you have to put something at the front of the track, which is like, oh, why would someone want to keep listening? Whether it's like an instrumental hook, something really strange sounding, or like a sample, or the chorus maybe, or like, it's, why would someone want to carry on listening after the first 20 seconds?
Which is like so different from what I imagine it was when it was like vinyl, like skipping such a pain in the ass. Forced to listen to it. So it's like it's changed so much, like for good and bad. I remember that reminds me so much of an article I read about Shazam, and they did all these stats on Shazam, and it was the year that that Clean Bandit song came out, Rather Be, and I wish I could remember it now, but it was something to do with like people shazamming within the first 30 seconds of that song, and the rate at which they did that in the first 30 seconds because of that string intro, like immediately grabs you. And then the rate of shazamming like dropped off like so significantly after that first 30 seconds. So it was all about how important for Shazam and Spotify and all that initial grab is. Which can be frustrating because sometimes you don't want to go like or have to worry about that kind of stuff, but it's kind of realistic that you need to grab people somehow.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's certainly in the production world as well, like doing a radio edit, for example. Obviously, Spotify, radio, different mediums, but essentially you could argue they do a similar thing these days with playlists and stuff. And you know, a radio edit is exactly that. You know, you've got to condense, if you've got a long song, you've got to condense it to 3 minutes or whatever it may be for the radio, and you need to exactly sort of lay down what the song is pretty quickly to keep the listener hooked. You know?
Unless you're Gautier, and then you can do whatever you want. It's like that song again, like the intro's like.
Oh really?
It was, I don't know, it's like 30 seconds or something, but I guess it's like a little thing.
It's like ding, 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 like
That's
ding,
true.
ding,
The
ding.
nursery rhyme bit.
That does lure you in.
It's weird. It's fresh. Yeah.
And I think, and the way that you described it sort of almost sounds like a potential sort of cynical thing that they're maybe doing, but at the same time, I suppose the way you described it is that actually, no, we just want to write really good songs. That, you know, if it's a good song, you're not going to flick through it, are you? You're going to keep listening.
But it's the same with novels as well. The first sentence has to be amazing. We all have like limited time. And, you know, you've got to just get people like, and it's always been that way with every art form, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like, why would a painter use red? You know, like, it's like we've all got the same eyes and ears, well, kind of. But, you know, but like, yeah, I think it's probably the same as it's always been, kind of. Oh, the other thing I've heard of is like, which you might know more about, Charlie, but like people mixing louder because they also, on Spotify, don't they... is this me? Oh, sorry.
Still.
Fidgeting.
Fidget.
Like, on Spotify, don't they track whether people are turning up the volume or turning it down as well as skipping? So I've heard people mixing things loud.
Well, there is definitely the sort of loudness war that's been going on certainly in the mastering field, and it obviously.
Are people just going louder and louder?
Well, I think I think it's definitely peaked, and in fact, Spotify have now lowered their loudness sort of line, as it were. Wow. So you know, we're sort of people are enjoying dynamic again. Which is, and certainly, you know, the music that I make, I love dynamic. You know, I don't really, not a big fan of mixing loudly because you know, everything's just like in your face for 3 minutes. It's tiring. And if you're listening to a whole album like that, you finish the album and go, God, I'm knackered. Whereas if you know you've got dynamic, then it's I don't know. There's just much more of a journey there, I find. You know, and thankfully that seems to be a positive thing now in the wider market.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely is a thing.
Next question? Yeah.
Going back to that theme of what's happening next, Charlie, you just put out the Franco Bolo record, which is an amazing record.
Oh, thank you, man.
I was wondering if anyone else on the panel was interested in taking on that kind of curatorial role, like taking control of putting out someone else's music, and how, if you were, how that might work alongside your own creative output. Like running your own label, managing, you know, doing stuff like...
I've like never thought about it. I think, I don't know, I have a friend who has her own publishing, like she's a songwriter and now has her own publishing adventure, and she's signing new talent and stuff, and I don't know, I've never felt a pull towards that, but I'm super young, so hopefully one day, I think I'd like to use a side of my brain that isn't just creative, I think. I miss that kind of left brain that's more like analytical and whatever. I don't know, right brain's creative. I miss using that. So maybe one day, not yet though. I need to make it first before I'm like an authority on like anyone else's career. Like I feel like, you know,
I think I respect artistry and people's career so much that I would only ever venture into something like that if I knew I was in the strongest position to do that. And as yet in my life, I haven't been, and I don't know if I will, but yeah, I'd always make sure that I would create a situation that being in an artist position I'd want to be a part of. And yeah, I haven't got the clout behind me just yet.
I've only done like curatorial things, like in terms of like running nights and curating a lineup, and curating collaborations on the night and things like that. But like, I've really thought a lot about starting my own label, and I've thought about it for years. But I suppose I've been living and working through one of the weirdest shifts in the music industry, and I think I've never got to a point where I've thought, yeah, it's a great time to start a label with
Good time.
Do you know what I mean? Although maybe
All
with
the best.
streaming,
Yeah. You know.
But maybe with streaming, maybe it is like becoming a bit more of a possibility where you need like lower capital and you could actually make some money, because I suppose if you're going to put so much time into it, I guess it has to be financially viable. And I don't think at the moment I wouldn't do something like that particularly, because I'm like just trying to get more established as well and use all the hours of the day to do that. But I suppose we're all just...
But I look at my friends that are doing that and I'm like, okay, that's how you get 10 houses. Like, if you're lucky, you'll get like 1 house as a songwriter. But if you're like, I feel like that's really savvy. And if you have that ability, then like, yeah, good on you. And it works. Yeah.
Multitasking.
Yeah.
It's certainly an adventure. You know, I'm really enjoying it, and I'm learning so much about the industry as well. And I agree with everything that the guys have said as well. Because I certainly wouldn't want to sign an act and then just let their career sort of rot if I didn't think I was able to push it onto the next level. You know, you know, I've seen campaigns go well, and I've seen them go badly. With when it's left the studio from me, and then I've seen, you know, people in the industry do both ways, you know, so I've learned so much from it. So I just thought there is maybe the control freak in me. It was like, I don't want to see someone else, you know, F this up. I want to see this do all right, and I know how to do it, you know, so that's really cool. Thankfully got an amazing team of people around me that are able to help me facilitate it, because like we were saying before as well, you know, I too and really enjoy using the other side of my brain, you know, the creative side, and you've got the sort of more sort of, I don't know what you call it, business side or whatever. But then you can't do both at the same time. Do you know what I mean? So I need to have a very, you know, strong, very skilled team around me, which thankfully I do.
I've put like friends together in sessions before, and then I had this thought. I was like, could I be an A&R? This was really easy. Like, but then I'm like, no, I don't think it's possible. I don't know anyone. Do you know anyone who's been a songwriter and an A&R? Evan. That's the only one. Oh no, he wasn't an A&R. I don't know. Do you know anyone that's done both?
Amanda Ghost.
True.
Yeah. I think now...
I just wonder if it's possible.
At the same time.
Yeah.
There's certainly some A&Rs that take some publishing.
Hello.
Chris has got one last very quick question. Yeah, I'm just thinking with the future of songwriting, on splits for producers and writers, it seems to be, it's changed quite a lot these days, where the producers are starting to take a percentage just for being in the room and recording it and producing it, even to the point where we've had instances where our writers have been asked to give away a big chunk because someone's come in to do some additional production later on. Where do you stand as writers when you're in a situation? Do you say, look, 3 of us wrote this song, that's the way it is, you get paid as a producer, you get your producer points? Or are you willing to give away some of your royalty on the chance that this producer's artist is going to put it out, and then maybe nothing happens with that track, but you've now given away a percentage of your songwriting? And Charlie, where do you stand from a producer side? Do you insist that, look, if I'm going to do this and my artist sticks this out, then I want a cut on every version of this song going forward? Because it is happening now, isn't it?
It is happening now. I've personally not done that, but it sort of has to be done on a case-by-case basis, really. And you'd hope that the people you're working with, you can have a sort of grown-up conversation about these things, and sort of see if, you know, everyone agrees that your input. And it's such a grey area, songwriting and production. Some of it, you know, some of it's very clear-cut. You know, it's like, no, I wrote the lyrics. You know, blah, you got the harmony, melody. But then in my mind, there is a bit of a grey area that you could argue. There's different arguments. It's like, can you go to open mic night with a guitar and play this song and it still stands up, or does it need that production around it? And then say that a hip hop track, a drum beat that's a massive part of the writing, in my opinion. Whereas if you put a drum beat on some other songs, it just gets labelled production. So it's a massive sort of grey area, big debate. And I suppose it has to be, from my point of view, I just like to have a grown-up conversation with people and see if they're, what they're saying. There's no sort of set rules, like if I'm going in the room with you, you have to give me 10% or something. That doesn't feel right to me, unless I really genuinely feel that I've progressed the song from my presence.
Best thing is when a producer takes a cut and hasn't actually produced. Like I had an instance where I don't want to sound bitter. I'm not bitter, I promise. But they wanted a percentage. You expect now that they're going to take a percentage of the song, and it's kind of for them putting it out. They're giving it a platform, and that's why you're giving them publishing, I guess. But then you realize that, okay, there's 2 people in this group, but then there's 5 people in the production circle that all need to be cut in on this song. So what started as a 5-way split turned into 8 people. And at the time I was really, up and coming, and this cut meant a lot to me. And I was not managed at the time, so I was also negotiating my own split. And it was really hard because I was exposed to that side, I guess, that managers are all the time, where I was getting WhatsApps from one of the DJs saying, if we don't settle this, we're not going to do the video this weekend. We've got the video shoot's going to be cancelled if we don't sign off. And all this stuff that I'm sure happens all the time. But for me, I'm taking it all really earnestly. Oh God, I'm holding up the video production, where it's a complete lie. So I don't know, it's and then it was annoying because they were headlining Coachella, and I was you're going to go and play the song that I wrote and probably earn, I don't know how much in appearance fees. And I don't get much of that. This is my only income. So as long as they're not taking the piss, you have to be realistic. You give away, sometimes you have to give away stuff in order to give it that, platform. But yeah, it's about respecting people, I think. Yeah.
100%.
And just yourself, and standing up for yourself. It's hard sometimes.
Yeah. This has only happened to me recently, in the last year or something. Oh, have I got time to stay?
Yeah, you got time to finish your point.
I was just going to say, it's happened to me a few times in the last year where I've written a song with a producer and another top liner or an artist in the room, 3-way split, in which case the producer's always pulling their weight and they're one of the songwriters. And to me, there's no distinction. That's just whoever's in the room, that's a 3-way split, definitely. But then someone has come along at the end and done ad prod and taken 10% or 15%. So everybody has to give away part of their songwriting to this person who is also going to get a producer fee. And that upsets me. And of course, if that guy's a famous producer and helps the song get cut, wonderful. But often that's not the case. So I don't know. I think it is a case-by-case thing. But if it leaves you feeling sour, I think
probably hasn't been done right.
Hasn't been done right,
Yeah.
and it's kind of pointless because you don't want to work with those people again because you think they're a bit shady.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I don't know.
All right. Thank you. This is great.
Hi.